Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Welcome to a historical thriller about the sudden, completely inexplicable destruction of the most powerful empires on Earth. Back in the year 1177 BC, the most technologically advanced superpowers didn't just slowly decay, and they didn't fall to internal politics. No, they were erased simultaneously in a single, terrifying decade of total fire and blood. We're talking about the Egyptian Empire, the massive Hittite superpower, the wealthy kingdoms of Mycenaean Greece, and the ancient trade hubs of Canaan. These societies commanded thousands of heavy bronze chariots, they built monumental stone cities, and they truly, genuinely believed their world was indestructible. But they didn't fall to slow decay, no. They were literally erased, all at the same time, in a single terrifying decade of total fire and blood. So, welcome to our explainer on the year 1177 BC and the Bronze Age apocalypse. When you map out the timeline of these events, it shows just how incredibly fast the whole thing unraveled. In 1180 BC, these empires are absolutely thriving. But then, just 3 years later, the fleet arrives. By 1170 BC, everything is burning. It's the sheer speed of this collapse that makes it so shocking. We are talking about going from a highly advanced civilization with, global trade networks and sprawling stone palaces, straight into a complete, literal dark age, practically overnight. Out of the horizon of the Mediterranean Sea, this monstrous fleet of black-sailed warships just appeared entirely without warning. They didn't send diplomats, they didn't make demands, they just swept across the coastlines of the ancient world like a plague of locusts. They burned every major city to ash, they butchered populations, and they wiped entire civilizations off the map so completely that their very names vanished from human memory for 3,000 years. History calls them the Sea People. And when the smoke finally cleared? 80% of the civilized world just lay in absolute ruins. Okay. To really understand the sheer horror of these sea people, we have to grasp what was actually at stake here. This wasn't some primitive era of isolated tribes, not at all. The Bronze Age was actually the world's very first hyper-globalized economy. It was a golden age of international law, diplomacy, and massive wealth. You had Egyptian pharaohs trading gold with Hittite kings, who then traded silver with Syrian merchants, who in turn supplied Greek warlords. It was all deeply connected. Think about this. To manufacture bronze, which was the absolute most important material back then for high-grade armor, weapons, and tools, these ancient empires needed two very specific metals. Copper was abundant, right? You could get plenty of it on the island of Cyprus. But tin? Tin had to be imported from remote mines literally thousands of miles away in what is now modern-day Afghanistan. So the crucial point here is that this created a massive, highly delicate international web. If just one link in that supply chain broke, the ability to forge weapons and maintain power vanished right along with it. Let me transport you for a second. The year is 1180 BC. Imagine you're standing in the grand coastal city of Ugarit in modern-day Syria. You'd be standing in the absolute financial heart of the Mediterranean. Picture multi-story stone palaces, totally filled with clay tablets detailing these massive international shipments of wheat, wine, and precious metals. It was the center of the world. And then, the horizon turned black. We actually have this terrifying, real-time glimpse into the final moments of this empire. Listen to this frantic message written by King Amurapi of Ugarit just as the fleet approached. His words practically shake on the drying clay. "My father, behold, the enemy's ships came here. My cities were burned and they did evil things in my country. Look, the country is abandoned to itself." And the craziest part? This message to the ruler of Cyprus was never sent. Archaeologists actually found this exact tablet baked solid in the catastrophic fire that consumed the palace just hours later. The Sea People breached the harbor, smashed the statues, and burned Ugarit to the ground so violently it was never rebuilt. And within months, that exact same nightmare played out across the entire Mediterranean basin. The dominoes fell with terrifying speed. The massive Hittite Empire, which, remember, used to fight Egyptian pharaohs to a standstill, it collapsed in just a matter of weeks. Their mountain capital of Hattusa was reduced to a scorched field of black ash. Over in Greece, the fortress palaces of Mycenae were systematically dismantled and burned. The writing systems used by the early Greeks vanished completely. Literacy just died. Art stopped. Out of dozens of major Bronze Age cities, almost none survived intact, completely plunging Greece into a 400-year silent dark age. So you really have to ask yourself, looking at all this sheer destruction, who on earth were these unstoppable phantoms of the sea? Because they just vanished back into the mist, leaving behind no homeland, no language, and literally zero records of where they even came from. I mean, where do you even look for answers when the writers of history have all been wiped out? Well, you look to the absolute last bastion of human civilization in the West. You look to Egypt. The only surviving eyewitness records of these invaders actually come from the walls of Medinet Habu in Egypt, where Pharaoh Ramesses III carved this massive, graphically intense monument detailing his desperate, bloody final stand against them. Ramesses III recorded something that clears up a massive misconception about the Sea People. They were not just some raiding army. They were actually a huge, migratory confederation of distinct maritime tribes, like the Pelesit and the Jeker, and they were moving together with their families, their livestock, and heavy ox carts. They weren't just raiding for gold. They were a whole nation on the move, desperately looking for a new homeland because their own world had been completely destroyed. When this vast floating armada reached the Nile Delta in 1175 BC, Ramesses III knew that if Egypt fell, that was it. Game over for human civilization. So he prepared a brutal, incredibly ingenious trap, which worked out in a few crucial steps. First, he hid thousands of Egyptian archers right in the tall reeds along the shoreline. Then, he sent out a small fleet of decoy ships to bait the Sea People into the shallow, narrow mouths of the river. Smelling blood, the massive invader fleet rode right on in. But the second they were crowded together in that shallow water, totally trapped without any room to maneuver, Ramesses unleashed absolute hell. The archers rained down this relentless hail of bronze-tipped arrows onto the decks, while Egyptian warships swept in with heavy grappling hooks, capsizing the enemy ships and dragging those heavily armored warriors straight into the water. The Nile Delta literally turned red with blood. Egypt survived, but man, only barely. It was the ultimate Pyrrhic victory. The immense cost of the war completely bankrupted the pharaohs. It shattered Egypt's trade routes, and it ended their golden age forever. Egypt just shrank back into its river valley, becoming a mere shadow of its former glory, while every single empire around it lay in total ruin. Here's where things get wild. Modern environmental science has revealed a genuinely horrifying reality. The Sea People anomaly? They were likely not the original cause of the collapse at all. They were just the desperate symptoms of a planetary domino effect. Historians and scientists call this systems collapse, which is the sudden, catastrophic failure of a complex society caused by a disruption to a foundational pillar. Remember that hyper-globalized, highly delicate international web we talked about earlier? When societies are that deeply interconnected, a disruption doesn't just hurt one country, it brings down the entire network. By analyzing sediment cores and fossilized pollen from the Mediterranean, researchers found a terrifying sequence of events. Science shows us that the 13th century BC was struck by a severe, multi-decade megadrought, and this led to widespread crop failures and massive famine across southern Europe and Central Asia. Naturally, starving populations sparked peasant rebellions. All this chaos completely severed those vital trade routes we mentioned earlier, starving the empires of tin, which made it impossible to forge new bronze weapons to maintain order. Driven out of their homes by sheer starvation, entire coastal populations took to their ships in a desperate, violent bid for survival. So these terrifying warriors, they were actually starving climate refugees. They essentially became an unstoppable snowball of destruction. They destroy one city just to feed themselves, which in turn forced the surviving inhabitants of that ruined city to join their massive fleet. They just rolled across the ancient world, growing larger and more desperate, until the entire global system literally shattered under its own weight. So what the Sea People really prove is the staggering fragility of civilization itself. As this quote captures perfectly, when a hyper-connected, globalized world collapses, it doesn't happen piece by piece over centuries. It happens all at once. It's a chilling, incredibly sudden chain reaction that reduced 3,000 years of human progress to ash in less than 10 years. Honestly, it's a really powerful, echoing lesson for our own modern, deeply interconnected world today. But you know, history never truly stops. As the Mediterranean burned and the Bronze Age died, another secret civilization was operating far away in the harsh deserts of Jordan. Carved directly into the face of sheer blood-red sandstone cliffs, they accumulated unimaginable wealth and built a hidden metropolis before vanishing their wealth into thin air. So, who became the ancient world's next ghost empire? Check out our next explainer to step inside the hidden rock city of Petra and uncover the incredible mysteries of the Nabateans. You seriously won't want to miss it.